Dr. James Dowd, author of The Vitamin D Cure, what's the best way to get vitamin D? Is it in fact the sun, or can diet, or how much can diet help?
So our bodies were designed to get the majority of their vitamin D from sun exposure. We don't know the exact ratios. We're guesstimating, but most of the data would suggest that somewhere between 70 and 90% of our vitamin D should be manufactured from sunlight, okay? And that only a small percent should come from food. Now that probably varies with latitude. Inuit Indians who sort of evolved, at least for tens of thousands of years, evolved in an Arctic environment where the amount of sun available for vitamin D is very low. They get a lot of theirs from food. They get most of it from food because they're eating seal blubber and whale blubber and fish livers and seafood that's loaded with vitamin D, okay? And so at that latitude, maybe Mother Nature intended you to get it more from food than as you move towards the equator, where her intention was that you would get most of it from sun exposure. So it's some mixture of the two. Suffice it to say, though, most of us, because of our lifestyle changes, our culture changes here in the United States, we're much more sedentary than we ever used to be. We have desk jobs instead of factory jobs now. We're not subsistence farmers like many of us used to be. There's industrial farms, and they sit in their air-conditioned John Deere tractor behind plate glass, UV blocking plate glass to plow the fields. So we're not out in the sun like we used to be even 50 years ago. And so we're becoming more reliant on getting our vitamin D from other sources. Unfortunately, food is, particularly with the diet we eat, is a lousy source of vitamin D. Our diet is 60% or more carbohydrates, and most of those carbohydrates come from bread, pasta, and cereal. There's no vitamin D in bread, pasta, or cereal, okay? The kinds of fat that's in our diet is more saturated than we need, and a lot of omega-6, and a lot of these are things like vegetable oils. There's no vitamin D in vegetable oils. And the meat we eat is livestock that is raised on corn and soybeans in a feedlot with very little grass feeding and less pasture time out in the sun. And so the meats even are probably have less vitamin D in them than a wild meat, like game meat. There may be people who, I have lots of patients in my practice who are hunters, and they eat venison and caribou, and this stuff is wonderful meat because these are animals who are eating their native diet of grass and vegetation. They're outside all the time. They're very physically active, and all of those things, as we know in humans, also raise vitamin D levels in animals, which means their meat and everything is gonna be richer in these nutrients. So food is not a very good source of vitamin D unless you're eating these foods like the Arctic Indians did, which are lots of fatty fish, not farmed fish, but wild-caught fish. Because again, the farming process, we start feeding them, I don't know what, Purina fish chow, which is probably more corn and soybeans. And again, you're creating a subpar fish or quality fish when you feed them those things. So wild-caught fish and seafood that are high in vitamin D, you get some, but it's very difficult to get all of your needs from those food sources without eating just a tremendous amount of these fatty fish. So diet is usually not a reliable source of D. You can get a lot of complementary nutrients there, vitamin A and magnesium and other things that will complement the function of vitamin D, but the D itself is not likely to come from there. Mushrooms, as an example, you get D2 from mushrooms, and you can actually get a fair amount from sun-dried mushrooms. But again, D2 has a shorter half-life. This wasn't the way we were meant to get most of our D. So sunlight still remains the primary source that our body relies on, and in the absence of that sun, because of cultural or social changes, we really need to supplement to make up for that difference. And that's what I emphasize in the book, is that most of us probably need to take a supplement to cover that gap.